This month's podcasts are sponsored by Aubergine Legal. Do you sometimes worry that your business isn't meeting all its legal compliance requirements and wonder if you're ticking all the legal boxes? Are you losing sleep worrying about a piece of legislation that you may or may not be complying with? Perhaps you need some help with your client contracts or your data protection compliance. Or maybe you're worried that your website doesn't have the right documents or legal notices in the right place. Perhaps you have a brand that you want to protect with a trademark. How about if you could outsource it all and eliminate all of your worries? If so, then get in touch with Aubergine Legal, a friendly commercial legal consultancy offering practical and clear commercial legal advice without the overwhelming legal jargon, taking the worry away and helping you to protect your business and minimise your risks. Aubergine offers a free 30-minute consultation if you have any questions or want to find out if they can help, and you can access this link and book your free 30-minute call via the link in the show notes. Welcome to the Bring Your Product Idea to Life podcast. This is the podcast for you if you're getting started selling products or if you'd like to create your own product to sell. I'm Vicky Weinberg, a product creation coach and Amazon expert. Every week, I share friendly, practical advice as well as inspirational stories from small businesses. Let's get started. Hello, so today I'm talking to Daniel Twiss from Soul Fruit. So Soul Fruit makes new and exciting dried fruit snacks using the best quality tropical fruits, simply dried into crunchy chips or chewy slices. So Daniel had so much passion for his products, which really comes across in this interview. I feel you'll feel it bursting into your ears with his passion for what he does. And he had so much practical advice to share with you as well. I personally found his story really, really inspirational. I think if you are looking to sell a product in the food space, this is an absolute must listen. But actually, a lot of Daniel's advice translates really well into any type of product. He speaks a lot about being authentic, about knowing your brand story and staying true to that. And I was really fascinated to hear that despite not having any background in retail or in food, how Daniel and his wife Natalie were able to overcome any obstacles, any things they weren't sure how to do. They really demonstrate a can-do attitude, which I find really inspiring, and I hope that you do too. So I would love now to introduce you to Daniel. So hi Daniel, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on, Vicky. Great to be here.
So can we please start with you giving an introduction to yourself, your business and what you sell?
Hi there. So my name's Daniel Twiss, and I set up Soul Fruit with my wife, Natalie. And what we're trying to do, trying to make snacking simple again with our single ingredient dried fruit snacks that are there to kind of satisfy all of your cravings, give you those little soulful moments of enjoyment that you look for when it's snacking, and just try to make every day a little bit more fun through snacking.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And just also tell everyone what fruits you have, because I think one of the things that I think is quite unique about Soul Fruit is you don't have, you have some fruit that not everyone else is selling. So tell us what fruits you have at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So we think one of the issues within dried fruit snacking is there's just very little variety. A lot of people have tried your classic prunes, dates, apricots, some of the kind of slightly more old school fruit. And then when it comes into more snacking format, there's dried mango, maybe a bit of dried pineapple, but that's kind of it. So what we're looking to do is try and really kind of grow the dried fruit category with kind of more interesting varieties. So we've got 3 fruits at the moment. We do a mango, we do a jackfruit, and also a dragon fruit as well.
Perfect. Thank you. And I would love to know what inspired you to get started with this. I know you mentioned that you wanted to change snacking, but what actually made you think, do you know what? I could actually start a business here.
Yeah, so it was something that was kind of on my wife Nat and I's mind for several years, actually. It was kind of, in the back burner, and then eventually we decided to kind of take the plunge. But basically, both Nat and I both have quite a big sweet tooth, and we're both just massive snackers. But whilst we were we were living in Asia and living in Sydney for several years. And one of the things that really kind of opened our eyes is just the amazing variety of tropical fruits that there are in the world. I'm a big lover of kind of, fruit flavored and sweet tasting things. And it was just a really interesting experience of just trying all these different delicious exotic fruits that I'd never ever had before. Trying to be a little bit healthier. We used to, back in the day, snack a lot on like Percy Pigs, Haribos, all of your, delicious tasting, but kind of the worst ingredients kind of snacks out there. And as we were trying to be a little bit more healthy, we were basically eating a lot more fresh fruit, dried fruit. I was even blending up fruit and freezing them, making into them ice lollies and things like that, just as a way of trying to kind of experiment. And, as I said, we really love snacking. So any different form we could kind of turn the fruit into was really, really exciting for us. So yeah, we just spent a lot of time trying lots of these different fruits. And when we then came back to the UK on holiday, a couple of times, we were always trying to retain those health turns that we've kind of done in our lives and not just diving straight back into our Percy pigs and so on. So we come back and we kind of go to the dried fruit section or look at the healthy snacks aisle and try to find something to kind of keep us going. But we just always found that in the UK, there was just a really limited variety of dried fruit. And even what's worse, a lot of it, is got additives to it, sugar, or it's yogurt coated, or it's got, preservatives in it, and it wasn't really all that healthy anymore. So yeah, we were just basically kind of in a bit of a position where we wanted to keep snacking on more dried fruit, but whenever we were back here, just never found enough satisfying options for us. So after a while, we kind of were like, there's definitely a gap in the market here. And it's something that we should do. I massively maintain to this day, this is the only business we would have ever set up. We weren't those people kind of looking to set up a business and then finding the right product for it. We just, through our lives and through our kind of own habits and trying to eat that bit healthier, kind of came across this gap, and we're really like, I think there's something we could do here. So that was kind of how the idea was born out. Took a couple of years of kind of nestling in the back of the mind before we actually really took the plunge and decided to go ahead and actually try and start the business.
Oh, that's fascinating. Thank you. And as you were talking, I was reflecting on a few things. One is that you're right, actually. If you go to a dried fruit aisle, even now, you do get a little bit more variety, but it's still a sort of 95% of varieties of the same fruit. And also I was thinking about the fact that I actually hadn't eaten a jackfruit or a dragon fruit until I tried your products. I've never eaten one fresh still to this day. So I think that's actually really exciting as well, that you're introducing people to different fruits and different flavours.
Absolutely. And I think that's, we have the philosophy, there are so many delicious, exotic, tropical fruits in the world. Why don't we have more of them as dried fruit options? We're big believers in that nature knows best, and I think it's very, very hard to ever replicate or get nearly as good flavor as you get in nature. Passion fruit, mango, watermelon, dragon fruit. There are just so many wide-ranging, exotic, delicious flavors. And part of what we want to do is exactly expose people to all these different tropical flavors that you wouldn't otherwise easily get in this country, or you'd be having to pay an absolute premium to kind of get your hands on. So that was really kind of a big part of the idea there. And I think, we live in a world now where a lot more people have traveled a lot more and tried different cuisines, different flavors, different ingredients, and I think people are really excited by that. I know Nad and I, whenever we go to a new country, we love going to kind of like markets, whether it is looking at the different kind of, fruit and veg stands and so on, and trying to pick out and figure out what weird and wonderful fruits they've got, or whether it's just trying local cuisine. There's so much excitement that comes from those trying different flavors. And that's what we're trying to replicate and bring back to people here in the UK.
Absolutely. And it is really exciting. And also, I can also say from personal experience, it's a really nice way to introduce children to other fruits as well. Because, my children love your snacks. I imagine if I put a jackfruit in front of them, they might turn their nose up. But funnily enough, when it's dried, it's something that feels a lot more accessible. So I think that's really nice as well, because we're all trying to get variety into our own diets, our children's diets. And I think this is a nice way to do it.
Absolutely. I think that, snacking has that benefit to it, doesn't it? When things feel in those, snackable textures or snackable formats, there's something very, very enticing and appealing about that. And there is, psychologies and so on behind it. But I just think that ability to have something that, tastes great, naturally sweet, because there's, nothing added, but fruit just does provide that natural sweetness, combined with all the nutrition and so on of fruit, but that just excitement and exotic flavors.
Yeah, and just having it in a little bright packet just makes so much difference, doesn't it? It's rather than giving someone a bit of raw fruit, for example, which of course is also a lovely way to enjoy fruit. But then, as you say, some of these more exotic fruits, they don't actually travel that well, and they travel a long way. Whereas in dried form, of course, that's something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that's really important for us is, we try to keep our snacks as close to nature as possible, but we absolutely agree that, fresh fruit is probably the best thing that you can eat. It's just that challenge of getting a fresh dragon fruit, jackfruit, mango, or trying to eat a mango on the way to work or before the gym can sometimes be a little bit challenging. And that's why dried fruit works kind of really so well for that. But yeah, I think exactly it's that ability to deliver those kind of snackable textures and snackable moments just makes it so much more of a kind of accessible and interesting snack.
So it's really clear to me that you really knew what you wanted to achieve with your product. So talk a little bit through when you decided, okay, we're going to go ahead with this, because you mentioned you'd had the idea sort of bouncing around a couple of years. Was there something in particular that made you think this is the right time to get started? Or was it just, okay, we've been thinking about this long enough now, let's do something about it?
Yeah, I think it was that. I mean, so we previously lived in Hong Kong and Sydney and then spent kind of 6 months in Vietnam. And it was essentially, we were moving back to the UK. This was actually just before COVID. We were planning on moving back, and we kind of had this idea in our minds for a long time. The thought of the different kind of fruits and different flavors and so on was always there. We kind of essentially wanted to be a bit Willy Wonka when it came to dried fruit. You know, as we said, we walked around these different fruit markets, picking up every different kind of fruit we could, and then just seeing like, can we dry this? How can we dry it? What can we, snacks can we make out of it? So it'd been there for quite a long time, but we decided to take the plunge when we were moving. Spent 6 months in Vietnam, traveling around, meeting all kinds of different fruit farmers, drying factories, really as many people as we could, which was quite an experience because neither Nat or I come from the industry. We're British, so we'd kind of turned up in Vietnam, trying to message people, drive to factories. We met a few interesting characters along the way, I'll be honest. But yeah, at the time, basically, we just kind of were trying to dry as many different exotic fruits and trying different ways of drying just to see what really we could do within there. As I said, we thought there was very little variety. And for us, that variety actually comes out in two key elements within Soul Fruit. The first, as you mentioned, is those different varieties of fruits, so the different flavors. But then also what we have is we have these two different textures, the way in which we dry our fruits. So we have what we call our chewy slices, and then we also have our crunchy chips. So it's quite funny that personal experience that brought us round to it. As we said, we really, really love snacking. And my wife, Nat, for her, the most important thing actually is texture of her snacks. She really likes really satisfying, chewy snacks. Whereas for me, I'm more about often typically crunchy snacks. I'm more of maybe in the daytime, like a crisp eater. But then I also really love kind of fruit flavored things. So it kind of turned into this us together in a product, whereby when we were working with these different factories, we were trying all the different drying methods out there. And there's been huge developments in terms of the drying technologies, of what they can do and how we can kind of really develop different textures. But again, even when we looked at what was existing in the market, often a lot of the dried mango that you'd come across is quite tough and leathery, and it didn't really have the same satisfying chew that you would have got from a packet of sweets, or you wouldn't be able to get this kind of, crunchy, crisp texture that you would have got from a packet of crisps. But that was really kind of what we were trying to do, is trying to actually replicate what consumers or what we would look for when it came to those really ultra processed and artificial snacks. How much can we provide the same snacking experience that you look for there, but without any of those health issues, without any of the saturated fats, artificial flavors, ingredients, and so on, just because I think it's so possible to deliver that, but people assume when it comes to snacking, they're going to be unhealthy. People don't think, oh, you can still snack and it can also still be a really healthy product. And that's what we wanted to kind of challenge the status quo with a bit, delivering those same satisfying snacking experiences, but with none of the drawbacks.
Yeah. And what I really like as well that you've spoken about is that you didn't kind of accept anything to be the status quo, because you were talking about going to different places and looking at different drying methods. And I have to be honest, again, until I tried your products, the only type of dried fruit I had personally is that chewy, tough, what I think of as traditional dried fruit. The fact that you could dry fruit into a crisp form and still retain the sweetness and the flavour was something that I've never seen. And I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I've personally have never seen it. So yeah, I really like the fact that you guys were obviously like very open to what is possible rather than what isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was really, I guess, coming from that position of a consumer, of being passionate about snacking. And, we have tried most snacks you'll come across in a snack aisle in a supermarket. And I think, for us, knowing what we'd enjoyed about different snacks and therefore how we can take elements of those and bring them into other products, because it was really important for us that, when you drying fruits, if you add sugar when you're drying, it actually just makes everything really easy. It keeps the texture nice and soft. You can dry it for slightly too long in the drying machine, slightly shorter, and it still comes out very, very, pretty good. It's a real stabilizer. But when you're drying fruits without added sugar, there is a lot more skill in terms of how you're drying it, the moisture content you're drying to, the length of drying time, how you cut the fruit even before it goes into the drying machines. And that's how we kind of ended up being a slightly Willy Wonka, where we were just really trying to change every different measure or input that we could and see what would happen at the end. And just really, experimenting, because I think there were so many opportunities to do that. But with the chips in particular, which is, I guess, something that is really, we're quite unique in doing, we use a freeze drying technology. So that still retains all the nutrition because it's happening at low temperature. But actually, it's quite interesting. Freeze drying came about as a way of bringing food up to space. That was its very, very first initial kind of function. And you could essentially then take food, take out the moisture, and then put it back with water, or put a piece in a glass of water, and it would naturally rehydrate. So that technology existed, and people would maybe drying fruits or other products using it, but they were just taking whatever the output was and saying, well, that's freeze dried fruit. That's how it is. Whereas I think for us, approaching it from that other perspective of going, I want to try to achieve a snack that I would typically pick up, in a supermarket shelves. How can I use this technology and try and work with it and adjust it to get as close to that as possible? As you said, not just accepting this is how freeze-dried fruit comes out, really kind of playing around with all the kind of, the process, the set points, to see how we can make it, for us, what we consider to be the most satisfying texture we could get.
Yeah, that's I really admire your resilience, by the way, to sort of get to where you have. So was it a case of finding places, you mentioned you're in Vietnam, so was it finding places in Vietnam that would work with you to experiment a little bit, essentially? Because I assume, this is an assumption, that they weren't perhaps doing this, when they started working with you, perhaps not the exact same process. So was it Correct. Finding someone who's willing to say, okay, let's try something new and see what happens?
Yeah, exactly that. We had actually, one of our first products was our soft-dried and dragon fruit chips. So soft-dried dragon fruit we had tried before, and that is something that actually, Vietnam is a very big producer of dragon fruit, so that product kind of is available. And when we were speaking with the factories there that actually then are able to do the other drying technologies, we were then working through all the different kind of, set points and so on with them, to try and get that, what we consider to be the best possible output. So yeah, it took a lot of back and forth, a lot of patience on their behalf, I think. I think they were probably a little bit surprised, two kind of British backpackers almost, basically, trying to do whatever they could, and being kind of a bit obsessive about the different kind of, snack qualities at the end. But yeah, really fortunately, we worked with some really great suppliers and farmers there that had that patience, were willing to work with us, and try to test out, the different kind of technologies and the different products we could create at the end of it.
And I am dying to know, Daniel, did either of you have a food or retail background at all before you did
Not
this?
at all. No, not at all. So we do have a complementary background. So my background was in kind of engineering. So I have worked in kind of supply chains and other elements like that. So I deal with a lot of the kind of finance, operations, logistics elements. And my wife, Natalie, she's been a background in kind of marketing and also a yoga teacher. So her background is more of that branding, marketing, the kind of health and wellness kind of space. So we definitely had complementary backgrounds in terms of the skills needed to run the business, but nothing in the food and beverage. All of our experiences, if you could call it that, purely comes from a consumer, just trying different elements and just kind of, knowing what we liked.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that, because I think it's really important for people to hear that you don't need a specific background to get into a certain product category. So I just think it's really good for people to hear, because you had no experience in food and drink other than, you say, being extremely passionate about it, and you still are able to produce this amazing product. So I just think that's something, I personally think that's really inspiring.
Well, thank you. And I massively agree with that. I think passion goes a long way. It really is underrated because, in setting up the business, there was a lot of times where we had to spend a lot of time researching, packaging requirements and, how to label correctly and nutritional, tables and so on. But because it was all focused around something that we were passionate about, we quite enjoyed all of the kind of investigation and all the learning that we had to do for it. So I think it is just something that is massively underrated, where people think you need to have practical experience. I think that is something that you can learn along the way, but you can't learn your passion. That either is there or it's not. So if you have that, the rest of it is all achievable, I think.
Yeah, thank you. And as you just touched on there's obviously so much that you need to do between having a product that you're happy with and actually getting that product to market. Is there anything in particular, or even more than one thing, that you think if someone else is listening and they've got an idea for a product in the food and drink space, is there anything you think it'd be useful for someone to know? Anything that you were perhaps caught out on or didn't realise?
There were definitely a few things that we kind of would have been caught out on, to be honest. I think probably the number one thing that we found in working the food and drink space is how great and helpful other brands or other founders are. Because I think in food and drink, firstly, there's probably more startups in any other than in any other space. Everyone has their brownie recipe or, drink cocktail recipe that they like. So I think there's always new products coming out into the market. And we found along the way that, just speaking to other brands and asking for a piece of advice here or there, something that could have taken us, a week to try and figure out on our own. And we would speak to another brand and say, just out of curiosity, how do you manage, where do you go to get your nutritional label created? How to test your product? Oh, here's the company that we used. And they're suddenly cut out a week's worth of work of your research just with that one answer. So I think it's amazing because these different brands and products, aren't really, or most of the time, aren't direct competitors. We know a lot of brands that are, healthy drinks or, healthy bars or chocolate-based products. And they're so willing to be helpful and give you those pieces of advices along the way that I think that was probably one of the biggest helps that we definitely had.
That's so nice to hear, first of all, because I don't hear that very often. So I think that's a really nice thing to hear. And also I think reassuring, because I think it can be, depending on your personality type, it can actually be really hard to ask for help or approach someone, and it can almost feel like a bit, is it okay to ask? So hopefully you've given people the confidence to actually just go and ask the question as well. Because I think the worst people can say is no. And I have to say, I found just from my experience with this podcast, people often like to talk about their business. They like to talk about what they've learned and they want to be helpful. So I think that's a really good reminder.
Yeah. And we try to have that pay it forward mentality. If people reach out to us, even when you're on a busy day, you kind of put yourself in that position. You're like, oh, if I answer this email and I can tell them this, that, the other, how much I know I've helped them, how much time I've saved them. And there's a massive pay it forward. People are always willing to help back. So I think it's just a great environment to be in.
Absolutely. So we have talked about this a little bit, but I wonder if there's anything else about what makes Soul Fruit different to other dry fruit on the market that we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about. So we've spoken a bit about the fruits, we've spoken about the drying process. Is there anything else you want to tell us?
Yeah, I think that the big difference for us and positioned in the market versus a lot of the other brands or the kind of snack products out there is, I think, that kind of consumer focus that, it came from snackers for snackers is kind of what we like to think about. And I think that kind of positioning of trying to say, we want to really deliver maximum value in every way that we can to our customers. So whether that is the quality of the fruit that we're using, that means that it has that really, really great flavor, whether it's the texture that we're drying it to, again, we're trying to achieve those most satisfying textures that you would otherwise have got from the ultra processed, really unhealthy products. In terms of sustainability as well, so we're members of 1% for the planet. So 1% of all of our revenue actually goes back to supporting a Blue Dragons Children's Foundation in Vietnam. And that's really important for us to have that kind of circular economy, that we're actually giving back to the communities that are actually growing our fruits, that, and giving those kids more of a future as well. Our packaging is now like 50% post-consumer recycled plastic. We're on that journey of trying towards sustainability in packaging, which a lot of companies are on and is very hard. But the steps that we can take in the intermediary is always super important to do kind of the absolute best that we can there. So we're always just trying to be kind of, as sustainable, as healthy, but really delivering on snacking enjoyment. We've done quite a lot of flipping and flapping as we've kind of developed the brand of going, what are our core values? What is it that we really want to stand for? And I think that, we are a really healthy product. We are single ingredient. There's nothing but the fruit in the bag. Every bag's one of your 5 a day, high in fiber, and all of those great nutritional benefits. But I think what's key and core to us is we just want snacking to be fun and exciting and satisfy those cravings, because that was always what drove us. We all have that mid-morning, mid-afternoon slump, where you kind of want to have a little bit of something, sweet or, crunchy or chewy to kind of get you through the rest of the day. And I think that snacking provides you a little bit of a soulful moment to yourself, whether you're doing something or busy, but giving that little bit of satisfaction, giving that little moment to yourself, bit of enjoyment, I think is something that we want to celebrate. Too often people talk around snacks and they talk about being guilt-free. And we just, honestly hate that term, because why do we have to feel that snacking should be guilty? Why can't snacking be celebrated and be fun and be enjoyable and be that great moment? Feeding your body, feeding your mind, mental health is really important, and giving yourself that kind of satisfaction, not feeling guilt the whole time, for things that we do in life. And that's really just what we want to be. We want to be fun. We want to be, enjoyable, and still then just snacks made the right way.
Well, thank you for that. And I have to say, I think it's great how well and how easily you can articulate who you are and what you're about. And I do honestly think that comes across with your products. All of that, when you look at your branding, your packaging, you definitely get that. So I think that's brilliant.
Thank you. It's taken a bit of flipping and flapping, I'll be honest. As with anyone who's starting another business or a product, you will have lots of moments where you think about different directions and you potentially move in a slightly different way. And I think what's really important is really remembering why you started the business, what your values are, what's important to you, because I think that becomes translatable. And I think that also becomes a clear reason for other people to want to engage. That idea that we used to eat so many artificial, sweet snacks. I think there are a lot of people out there that enjoy those kind of, sweet-based snacks, sugary packets. And I think that delivering something that can give you all of that satisfaction without the downsides worked for us. So it's something that we want to share to others.
Yeah, thank you. And I think also what I'm taking as well is that there's a lot to be said for being genuine. And because I think you can tell when someone is being genuine about their product, the passion for their product, why they create it. There's something that it makes it a lot easier to resonate with a brand.
Yeah.
So you sort of talking about the fact that you used to eat, anything in the Tesco snack aisle or whatever. Like you say, people can relate to that. Whereas I think sometimes it can be tempting to think we have to hide those parts of ourselves or our, the some of that things like that. If it feels like, we have to put up this front or talk about, just focus on the healthy side of the products. But I really like the fact that you talk about how yours are fun as well, and also about your own experiences, because I do genuinely think it makes for a more interesting story and it helps customers to relate as well.
Oh, absolutely. I really appreciate that comes across. I think it's, we always say, we are brimming in terms of our passion for snacking and so on, as opposed to being necessarily passionate about business per se. And we really hope that kind of does come across. But it is something that I think, particularly in dried fruit, it's important that I think we are that transparent and we are that honest about it, because, not all dried fruit is made equally. There's a lot of products out there that have, artificial preservatives. They have, added sugars. There's a lot of products that will say, 100% fruit, 100% natural. You look on the back and it's, purees, it's pulps, it's added natural sweeteners. And those things are really, not good for you. There is this whole sugar debate on at the moment, which, I think that's a whole separate topic that would take up a whole nother podcast episode in a way. But it's really important that consumers are more wary around what actually they're putting in their body, what is truly natural, what is healthy, and looking at the ingredients list. And it's why we've been very clear from the start as well that we will only ever be single ingredients. We will never add any sugars, any concentrates, any pulps, any preservatives into our products, because for us, we're celebrating Mother Nature's candy, and I don't think you can do better than that. So I think the idea of trying to add in all these additives as a way of kind of either increasing profit margins or trying to, make your product seem more appealing, I think is really the wrong direction. I think consumers are becoming very savvy to that. So ensuring that we're basically being as clear and as transparent, as honest as possible, and we stand up and say, we are not an alternative to fresh fruit. Absolutely. Please go and eat an apple instead of us. What you should eat our products instead of is packets of crisps, packets of sweets, chocolate bars, biscuits, all of those ultra processed, unhealthy snacks.
Yeah, thank you. And I was thinking this exactly the same as you when you were talking, that I think consumers are getting more savvy. I mean, I know if I pick up anything in the supermarket, the first thing I do is flip it to the back and see what ingredients are in there. And I think a lot more people are doing that now. And I think it comes back again to I was talking about sort of consumers having trust in you, because I've definitely looked at products that, as you say 100% fruit, and then you turn it over and then there's a whole list of additives. And I feel like, to me, I'm put off by that now, because I'm like, well, it's not quite what you said it was. And, and I wouldn't have any loyalty to that brand. Whereas I think that brands that can sort of deliver on what they promise, I think it's much easier for customers to be loyal to, because you know what you're getting.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. Being clear and honest and upfront about what is in your products, I think, is one of the most important things at the moment. There was already a health trend, but I think COVID has definitely, also helped accelerate that. And people are, massively conscious about what they're putting into their bodies. There's so much research and so on, things that are coming out. People follow Tim Spector and, the Zoe diet, all of these kind of things that are happening at the moment, as the advances in understanding nutrition, how our body reacts to different ingredients, different products, is really taking big leaps forward. And I think that's something that we are wanting to be clear about. As much as I said that, we are a fun snack, and that was always our focus on being that fun side, the way we focus on staying healthy is trying to stay as close to nature as possible. We aren't food scientists. We aren't, coming at this from a very overly technical perspective, but we've learned a lot along the way. And I think that consumers understand that. When you open one of our packs and you take out a slice of dragon fruit, it is a whole slice of dragon fruit. You can see exactly what fruit that came from. If you look at a lot of these other fruit-based snacks or fruit products, you take them out and they're reformed into a bar or into certain shapes or into certain things like that. And sometimes I even have it, you eat it and you go, what fruit actually is that? And you're trying to figure out. As soon as you see that, people realize this isn't really healthy. This isn't close to nature. This isn't, a whole fruit, right? This has been pureed, pulped, blended, which has the whole issue about creating free sugars and making it actually truly unhealthy. And for us, consumers, we don't want consumers to have to always flip to the back of the pack and always have to read the ingredients. As much as I think it's an important thing they do, we want to be easily reliable, where people can just look at our product and go, I can see that is fruit. That really looks like fruit to me, just simply dried. And not this idea of that you're looking at products that look like other things, but are telling you that they're fruit.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I'd like to pivot slightly, if that's okay, to talk about getting stocks in retailers, because I know that's something that you've been able to do. But I guess to kind of keep it on what we're talking about, I'm just really curious as to how much of the sort of the things we're talking about, so single ingredient, the differences in your products, how much of that plays into being able to get stocked, if that makes sense? Is that a part of your pitch? Is that something that retailers are interested in?
Absolutely. I think that the reason we've had a bit of success in getting into retail, because it is a very, very tough route and thing to do, is because of that initial assumption that we had at the very start that there is a bit of a gap in the market here. I think as consumers are trying to eat healthier products, there aren't many dried fruit brands out there, and particularly as we say about those, truly healthy dried fruit products. So absolutely, that is quite important. There's a whole thing in retail called HFSS legislation, which is high fat, salt, sugars, which essentially means retailers can't do certain promotions on products that, would have, too much fat, salt, or sugar in it. They can't put them near the checkout. This is something that's been delayed by the government, implementing some of them, but it's things that are happening because of consumer preferences. So there is a huge amount where people are looking to say, suddenly I look at my snacks range and 90% of them are ultra processed, really unhealthy, and I don't have enough products that are catering for this growing movement of healthy snacking. So that's something that I think we've been quite fortunate in, that, retailers have been looking to grow that category and expand the kind of offerings within that range. Which I think has worked kind of very fortunately well for us. But that really comes about from that consumer preferences, and the retailers are then kind of, following that consumer trend.
That's really interesting. And how interested, I'm curious on this, how interested are retailers in sort of the story, what makes your brand different, to the story about, your brand, or are they more interested in products? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think really when it comes to retail, it's one of those things. There's no hard and fast rules. It's a little bit of everything, and also some retailers are different to others. So definitely, it's really important. I think having that brand story, having a reason behind the product, and solving a specific problem. When people are looking to bring out, another packet of crisps, for example, they'd look for one that isn't just exactly replicating a brand that they would already stock, because then they would just be competing against each other. So having products that are offering different points of different unique selling points, or offering different benefits, different experiences to the customer, that I think is really important for a retailer to understand. Why is your product different to what I already have on my shelves? And why is that different something that customers are actually looking for? But that can be anything. That can be, as we talked about, the textures, the different fruit varieties. It can be the brand story. It can be the packaging. It can be the sustainability angle. All of these are viable reasons why consumers want to identify with different brands. And I think it's just really important that whatever your positioning is in the market as a product or a new brand, you understand why would a consumer want your product, and go in on that and really ensure that that is something that is you can demonstrate, you can explain, you can articulate on your packaging perhaps, and that retailers will be able to understand this is why you are different to what else is out there.
Yeah, thank you. Because I remember being told by a previous podcast guest that essentially if a retailer takes on your product, they're having to drop someone else because they only have so much space on the shelf. Now, I don't know whether that is still the case, because this was a number of years ago, but it does make sense to me that you have to almost fight for your place to be there, because it's not like you're going to someone who's got empty shelves that needs filling up. They either
Exactly.
presumably do need to stop stocking someone else, or they need to make space for you, and they need to have room. They hold all the cards, don't they, ultimately? So I guess you do have to have a really compelling reason as to why they would want to stock your product.
Absolutely. It is a case that you're right, that most retailers have limited shelf, and it will be some way of a one in, one out. It depends. We were in a category that was growing. So I think for us, it was instead of being a one in, one out, put one dried fruit product in, kick another dried fruit one out, they were looking more saying, we need to grow the healthy snacks category. So we're actually kicking out some of the unhealthier products, perhaps. And that's how kind of retailers, I guess, work, and where they need to understand the market and understand what their customers are really looking for. And of course, then all retailers are different in that, what they're specifically offering to their customers. So you have to think about it from that perspective. And you have to be, I think, able to articulate to a retailer then why your product should be new and on the shelf, realizing that it's not just, oh, it's nice, or, customers like me. You exactly have to articulate that point of difference, of saying why it's, really better than other products, and why customers would really pick you up instead of somebody else.
Thank you. And on the subject of retailers, do tell us which retailers you're stocked in for anyone who wants to go and pick up a pack today.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. So we're listed online with Ocado. We're in stores with Planet Organic, in Harrods, in Selfridges. We're listed online as well with Holland & Barrett. We're working on getting our way into Holland & Barrett stores, but Holland & Barrett have actually launched their whole own range of crunchy fruit and freeze-dried fruit chips as well. And we're also then listed in a number of small kind of independent retailers. We're online on Amazon, and then also direct online on our website as well, soulfruit.co.uk.
Amazing, thank you. And I'm going to ask you a few questions about Amazon in a moment. But just last question I have on getting stocked in retailers. So you're in some really big name stores and online retailers. And is that a case, if you're thinking about getting stocked, of approaching them proactively? Is that how it tends to work?
Yeah, absolutely. Buyers are notoriously difficult. They have a million and one things to do. When you've got to imagine, if a supermarket shelves, you think how many products are on there. You've got a category buyer that might be, for example, the snacking buyer. Think how many different snack products and brands they have to look after, let alone introducing new products. So they are hard to get a hold of. But yes, you need to kind of be persistent and persevere with it. There's a couple of organizations out there that can help you with trying to approach them. So we've done a few with Bread and Jam, for example. They're fantastic. Product Guru as well. They do some kind of like online lightning pictures, or they do buyer days. which are a relatively inexpensive way for brands to try and meet buyers. Trade shows are quite expensive to do, so it's kind of a stepping stone towards doing those. But it really is a case of being persistent, because you may email them 3 times over the space of 3 months and never hear something back. And then 3 months later happens to be the time that they're actually doing their range review, and they're then going to get back in contact with you. But it's hard for you to know always the timing that's going to be right for them. And also, they're never normally going to give you all of that information by telling you when their range review, what they're looking for, those specific things. So you just do need to be a bit persistent, not overly so. I wouldn't recommend bombarding a buyer, but dropping them notes just to let them know, this is what we're doing. This is an interesting development. This is a, feedback we're hearing, or this is a reason why our product, is doing well, is good, just to give them those kind of nudges in the right direction.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I had a feeling you were going to say something like that, because I do know from, speaking to other guests that getting stock can be hard work, but it sounds like if you have a bit of a plan and you just keep working at it, then, you can definitely get some success.
Absolutely. It really is. I'm being an engineering background. I love to have a process and know that there's a tangible result at the end. So it's something I found difficult, but it is that case of just, you've got to keep kind of plugging away.
That's great. Thank you. So let's very briefly, if you don't mind, just touch a little bit on your Amazon experience, because I know you've been on Amazon for a little while now. And I guess the main thing I'd love to know is that anything that you've learned from that experience that you think would be useful for others.
Yeah. We have been on Amazon for quite a while. I admit it's been up and down in terms of how we've been on there, partly because as a business, we've had challenges around getting enough product and stock, into the country and so on. Which was always challenging. I think Amazon, it's an amazing platform and environment ecosystem to kind of have your product. I mean, most people don't think of Amazon when it comes to food products, or I didn't before starting this, but actually there is a huge amount of food, and people do buy snacks and so on kind of online from there. So I think it's a really, really great place to have any kind of food-based product, actually. It is something that you do need to work at as well. It is something that isn't just a case of simply set up, that's it, done, and let it go. You do need to think quite a bit around your product imagery, about your product listing. What are the right keywords that you're kind of including in there? What other brands are in your space, and therefore what keywords are they targeting? Should you be doing similar ones, or should you be doing slightly different ones that are your own niche? There is quite a lot of research and kind of planning that can go into that. Which you helped us out with massively. We were very, very kind of novice when it came into this. But it is something that I think is, a great doors to open. So I would say it's something that people need to really spend some time thinking about, trying to understand your brand, understand your consumers, understand what they're looking for, what you're offering, and really have a clear picture of that in mind. So these are the words that I'm going to focus on. These are the images that I'm going to use. This is how, for us, for example, we show the pack of what they look like. It's brightly colored packs, look appealing. But then actually it's really important to show also images of what does the fresh fruit look like? Because a lot of people don't know what a dragon fruit is, for example. What does the pieces of the dried fruit look like? Because you don't want this mystery bag that you're opening that you don't really know what actually is inside. Can you have some pictures of people, consuming the product, showing how it could be used? For ours, for example, there can be a snack, but you can also use them as like a topper on yogurt, on granola, on home baking and so on like that. So how can you demonstrate different use cases as well within your imagery? I'm also massively a believer, an image speaks 1,000 words. Getting some of those main images right. And if I were to look at another product on Amazon I'm thinking about buying, the first thing I do is scroll through all the images, because it's the easiest way for me to try and understand the product and is this right for me? So I think there's a lot of things that can be done by just really cleverly thinking about your product, your position, and how you can showcase that best with, firstly, I think the images, but then also with those texts, those keywords, the product descriptions.
Thank you so much. And do you know what? I don't think I could have said that better myself. And it's really nice to hear you say that, because it's something that I talk about lots on this podcast, is the fact that it's work. Because there was once upon a time, and it was a long time ago now, you could put something on Amazon and sort of, maybe not your best effort, and you would still sell products because it was relatively new and there wasn't a lot of competition. But unfortunately, it's just not that anymore. And I say unfortunately, I think it's probably a good thing, because I feel like everyone has to sort of up their game a little bit. Everyone has to make more of an effort to sell their products, which of course is what it's about. And then, as you say, I think the rewards are there, but it's just, it does take a bit of work and doesn't happen overnight. So it's really good for you to share all of that. And yeah, I completely agree with everything, because I mean, at the end of the day, it's a big search engine, if you want to think of it like that.
And I think that the other key thing that is really important is with Amazon Prime. So us being a snack, you know, we're typically an impulse purchase where you buy it because you're hungry now and you want to eat it. So the idea of often when you buy something online and you have to wait 3, 4, 5 days for it to get delivered is not always the best when it comes to snacks. But with Amazon Prime, the fact you can buy it and the next morning it will be there is really, really helpful, I think, for kind of the food and the kind of snack business on Amazon, and why I think it actually is a really, really great place to be. I think the one other element that I would mention in there as well is that we started off flipping between, you know, fulfilling ourselves and working with Amazon FBA. Amazon FBA just takes a lot of hassle off your side. And I think as a small business, you have 1,000,001 things to do and never enough time in the day to do it. Where you can find services that just make your life easier, that's worth its weight in gold. So I think it's one of those things, you know, people are looking at being like, oh, do I really want to do it? It might have slightly higher costs, you know, this and that. I think there's a huge amount to be said of just make your life easier.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I know that for some food businesses in particular, people can worry and think, oh, can I send food into it? And that, yeah, absolutely you can. With a few exceptions, you can send food products into Amazon. And, you know, of course, you have to think about expiry dates and things like that. But actually, you don't have to be sending in thousands of units. You can send in the 10. I mean, we've spoken about this. You can send it in the 10. You don't have to be sending in loads of stock and worried that it's all tied up. It's much more flexible than people imagine. And of course, if you have any questions on this, then you can always just ask me as well. So thank you so much for everything you shared, Daniel. I've really loved hearing more about your story. Obviously, I knew some of it, but hearing sort of the behind the scenes, as it were, is so interesting. And as I said earlier, inspiring as well. And I have one final question, which is, what would your number one piece of advice be for other product creators?
Ooh. I think my number one piece of advice would come back to that point around passion. I think passion is substitutable. It's probably not a word, but let's roll with it. I think that you'd be amazed at how much the little practical hurdles that people think of are big obstacles are easy enough to overcome. I think the thing that's hard to really replicate is a real passion and a real desire to want to do something or be passionate about a space. So if it's something that's been on your mind, it's something that you've thought about, has been there, go for it. You'll be amazed at how much all the things that you think at the start are massive obstacles and hurdles are actually quite easily surmountable.
Thank you so much. And you are as I said earlier, you are a great example of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vicky. Really, really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening right to the end of this episode. Do remember that you can get the full back catalogue and lots of free resources on my website, vickyweinberg.com. Please do remember to rate and review this episode if you've enjoyed it, and also share it with a friend who you think might find it useful. Thank you again, and see you next week. If you've been inspired to start a podcast in 2024, I really recommend my podcast host, Captivate. Captivate were my top pick when I started podcasting 4 years ago because of how easy it was for a complete novice like me to get started. I've stuck with them for the last 4 years because Captivate is still really simple to use. They keep adding great new features like the ability to share ads like these, and they've just been really reliable. So when you're ready to start your own podcast, you can use the link in the show notes and get a free 7-day trial with Captivate.